We ain't trying to blend in. If you're ready, come on with us, my friend. Come on. We can change the world. Hey, hey, we can change the world. Let's go.
What changes the world? The only thing that ever really changes the world is when somebody gets the idea that love can abound and can be shared.
Sports. Generational activities that shape and define our culture and create memories that last a lifetime. From our first steps on the field as a kid, or taking in our first professional game with Dad, to experiencing friendships and the camaraderie of teammates, the thrill of victory, and the lessons of defeat. We cheer for our favorite teams, and sometimes we even identify as part of the team. In America, our favorite sporting moments are etched in our minds forever. Today, however, the treasured sights and sounds of the games that so many of us remember will soon be replaced by new sights and sounds, changing how future generations of sports fans, casual and fanatic alike, will not only remember the games they once loved, but their lives will be forever changed by their outcomes.
For the past 25 years, if you wanted to bet legally on sports, Nevada was the only state where you could gamble on individual games. But not everything that happens in Las Vegas stays in Vegas. This decision opens the door for legal sports betting nationwide. The justices said a 1992 federal law that banned all but a handful of states from having sports betting violated states' rights. The gaming industry is calling this a groundbreaking decision that will revolutionize the gambling business. And it's also a major victory for states like New Jersey, which challenged the law and says it'll have sports betting up and running there in a couple weeks. More than 15 other states are expected to follow in the year or so ahead.
The way fans have watched and participated in the culture of sports in our country has been mostly the same for generations of Americans. With the new shift in law and states continuing to allow legalized sports betting inside their borders, it's only a matter of time before sports gambling becomes part of the ingrained culture of sports fandom. Memories of getting your first hot dog will be replaced by betting on your first game. Instead of seeing a Nike or Adidas logo on your newly purchased team merchandise, they'll be embroidered with designs advertising the now prominent sports betting companies. You'll see t-shirt cannons replaced in between innings with prop bets. Free fantasy apps for children will teach and train them how to gamble with imaginary money so they are ready for the real thing when the time comes. Of course, these are only a few examples of the potential dangers to the culture of sports fandom in the years ahead. A shift that will likely allow sports gambling to skyrocket towards the top of addictions held by Americans, coming alongside pornography, drugs, and alcohol in the discussion for what ruins lives in our country the most.
My name is John Simmons, and in this film, we will discuss how gambling is about to change how sports interacts with our nation and our lives. We will tell the stories of people who have been addicted to the game and search to uncover the secret dangers of sports gambling that lie ahead for many Americans. The gaming industry sees a revolution ahead, but is the average sports fan ready for those changes to infiltrate their daily lives and perhaps forever transform their future? My question is, when did rooting for your favorite team stop being a game?
This was me in the mid-2000s, holding my newborn nephew. I had recently missed his birth. Why? Because I'd been gambling. But here I was, finally sharing some of my valuable free time with him and my family. Don't I look excited? That outfit I'm wearing was my poker dealer uniform. Poker is where my journey to sports gambling got started, but it was not the original plan and vision that I had for my life. Nope. That started way back when I was 5 years old. The first plan I had for my life, like so many other kids born in the 80s, was to be Daniel LaRusso. I was the Karate Kid almost every year for Halloween. A few years later, I turned 12 and my mom bought me my first electric guitar for Christmas. That was a game changer because I became passionate about music. I started a band and we played local shows around the city. And due to that love for music, I was drawn to my local high school radio station. While working at the station, I heard the Howard Stern Show for the first time, and a new passion emerged: talk radio. Hosting a talk radio show became my new #1 passion. So after high school, I went to a broadcast training school and got a job at a local radio station. And if you would have asked me right then what my plans for my future were, I would have told you. I would have been convinced that my future was to be radio talk sensation, and people all across the city were about to hear my voice on their morning commute.
It's currently 63 at your hit music station in St. Louis. You're listening to
C100.
But my plan to work in radio forever and be the voice heard by millions across the country did not unfold how I thought it would. Because around the same time I started my career in radio, I was introduced to online poker. I can still remember one of my friends saying, "It's a minute to learn and a lifetime to master." I was definitely intrigued by that because I loved playing stud poker games for dimes and quarters around the kitchen table growing up. But this new Texas Hold'em game, that was an entirely new concept.
Eventually, 838 people will say goodbye. After all, there can be only one winner.
Ben Gwynn has been eliminated. He's our $5 million.
And above them all is the accountant from Tennessee, Chris Moneymaker.
And not a bad place for Mr. Moneymaker to be, considering he won his way into this tournament by winning a $40 entry fee.
This could be the last card of the 2003 World Series of Poker.
It's a 5.
Turned $40 into $2.5 million. Was this the game plan from day one?
Of course it was.
Watching Chris Moneymaker turn $40 into $2.5 million, that inspired me like nothing in my life up to that point ever had. Not Daniel LaRusso, not music, not even radio. I wanted to do the same thing he did. And so for my 21st birthday, I headed to Las Vegas with high hopes for my future life. What I didn't know was that following Chris Moneymaker was going to lead me down a path to bankruptcy, depression, suicidal thoughts, and a huge, long, suffering bout with sports gambling. Poker, for me, was a doorway into a world that I didn't know anything about: sports betting. And I wish that door would have stayed closed. I mean, look at this picture. If you ever wanted to know what depression looks like, this is it. Once I got back from Las Vegas, I found a local casino that had a poker room. It was amazing, 13 tables. And this is where I just fell in love with the game of poker. I went and played every minute of the day that I had the chance to. Eventually, I got a job as a poker dealer to be very close to the game that I love so much. But in order to embark on my new life as a full-time poker player and a dealer, I had to quit my lower-paying job at the radio station. Without much thought, I was willing to give up on my childhood dreams and pursue this new passion of poker. After a couple years as a poker player, my dealer salary was not enough to cover my gambling habits. In 2005, I lost every dollar that I had to my name and had to file bankruptcy. I built up a tremendous amount of credit card debt, and for the first time, I had to share my financial problems with my family. Yeah, that was a tough day. I had to confront the mess that I had put myself in, but my family and my friends, they were taken completely off guard, both by the financial stress that I put myself under, but also the revelation of the gambling addiction itself. When a person is addicted to gambling, it is unlike a person's addiction to alcohol or drugs, where an observer might be able to notice a physical change in the person's behavior. Gambling is a hidden addiction. To the world, a gambler can look like they're living a normal life, but in reality, they're living with what some groups consider a disease.
Sport betting is different than other forms of betting and also other forms of addiction. And here's why. So the biological definition of empathy, the ability to feel the emotions of another, is based on neurologically neurons that are mapped on the left temporal lobe called mirror neurons. These mirror neurons are what allow us to be able to mimic a behavior after a single observation of that behavior. The reason why that's important is because that is why we enjoy sports. Because we go to a game and we feel as though we are engaged in the behavior of that game because of these mirror neurons, because of our ability to experience empathy. When you add betting onto it, now you've taken my interest in the game and my connection to the game, and you've ramped it up at an exponential level. And so gambling on sports is different than even gambling on any other kind of card game or any other game of chance. And that is what I think is going to suck people in. The allure of that, people are going to get bombarded by that in a way that is going to be promoted by society.
That was me. And after my bankruptcy, I was under the watchful eye of my family and friends, who now knew about my addiction and wanted to help me stay clean. One of the things I did was sign myself off from the casinos, a DAP list they called it. It's a self-exclusionary program where if you sign it, the casino can arrest you for trespassing if you come back. Many states provide preventative measures like this to help problem gamblers stay away from casinos. Signing off the casino is just a quick fix though. It doesn't really help the root cause of a problem gambler. They're dealing with an issue that's still in their heart. For me, it just made me more creative in the ways that I would go and gamble. At first, I would travel to states far away, so I wouldn't get arrested in casinos in Missouri. Eventually, that creativity allowed me to start betting on sports.
So there I was one weekend having a conversation with my roommate. He was betting on the St. Louis Rams, the local football team. And he said he was getting 10 points, and I didn't know what that meant, really. And he explained that the way sports betting worked, one of the ways that sports betting works is that you can bet imaginary points. And so if the favorite, or the team who's expected to win, will have to decrease their points by a certain number, and the team that's not expected to win will get a certain amount of imaginary points. He said, well, in this particular game, the Rams were getting 10 imaginary points. This quenched my curiosity because I'd sort of heard them talk about betting lines and things before, and I never understood why somebody wouldn't just bet the Patriots in the season where they went undefeated except for in the Super Bowl, bet them every game and be a millionaire. Like, it never made sense to me. So that helped me understand what that really meant. I decided I wanted to get in on some of that. You know, I wasn't able to go in the casino locally, and I didn't have the money to go travel to another casino out of state, so I put $30. Well, I didn't have much. I put $30 on the Rams getting 10 points, and a couple hours later I had lost $30 because
47-3 the Jets wind up winning, the largest margin of victory in franchise history.
And you would think that losing a bet so dramatically would teach me that I didn't know what I was doing and I should stop right there. But you don't really know me. When I get my teeth sunk into something, I want to keep going. So I just wanted to win a bet, so I had to keep going, so I had to keep learning, and that sent me down a path of trying to figure out all I could about sports. I became consumed. It happened so quickly. I didn't even understand how fast it happened, from the time of me not even really being a sports fan, not even really a casual fan, to being like an all-in, every sport on TV, I'm watching it type of person. And it's not the type of person that I ever had been prior to the moment that I began putting money on the games.
Call me tomorrow for my pro football game of the year. Until then, this is Brandon Lang saying good night and good gambling.
You know, networks don't talk about it. Government can't tax it. But sports betting is a $200 billion a year business.
When I started betting on sports, online sports books were becoming popular, as well as television and radio commercials promoting 1-800 numbers to get betting tips.
You know how some of your friends tell you there's no such thing as a sure thing? There's no locks. There's no guaranteed winners. Forget those people. You know what they are? They are losers.
Movies like Two for the Money, starring Al Pacino and Matthew McConaughey, started to shine some light onto the world and culture of sports gambling. Much like the poker boom of 2003, I had unintentionally found myself riding America's new wave of sports gambling explosion. I filled my free time learning about the teams and all the players, and reading constantly about betting strategies. To me, sports betting was just a game of skill, just like poker had been. I thought I could use my knowledge and wisdom to give me an advantage over the house that I didn't have in games like craps or roulette at the casino. As a bonus for myself, I was able to gamble on sports and hide it well from others because no one expected me to be doing this when I had a poker problem. But I did, because I began betting on games every Sunday during the NFL season. The following spring, I joined my first ever fantasy football league, and for the next several years, my focus and attention shifted from traveling out of state to play poker to watching and betting on sporting events on the television from my own couch.
Yeah, I guess it was baseball league, fantasy baseball league.
We were in fantasy baseball league together, yeah.
You were the commissioner, and the recaps at the end of each week were... We all waited for the recaps because we wanted to see how John roasted everybody in the the league. And I remember thinking, I'm like, man, if this guy would ever take this ability and use it for good, because it was... I wish I still had some of them.
You know why I wanted to be the commissioner of that league? Can you guess why? So that I could get the money.
Oh, okay.
I gambled all your guys' money away.
Okay. I didn't win anything.
Yeah, but that's why I did it. I've never told that story out loud. I positioned myself to be the commissioner every year because I knew it would be a big influx of cash in my pocket. And then
temporary loan
that I would use to gamble, and I'd be like, well, I've got the entire baseball season to make it back if I can't win it back, and then I would pay you guys back at the end of the year. After a while, any winning weeks that I had in betting on sports was wiped away because I continued to do so every single game, every single week. And this is the same problem that I had with poker. I didn't have an off switch from my gambling habit. I would continue to go until there was no more money left. Even if I had a great big win, I would just consistently, over and over, continue to bet until that money was gone. It wasn't necessarily that I was a bad gambler, it's just that I didn't know how to stop. So once again, I found myself looking to borrow from outside sources to manage my finances. And this is when I found probably the most disastrous thing that could have happened to me as a problem gambler in the sports betting world. I found sports books and bookies who were willing to let me bet on credit. After I had filed bankruptcy in the mid-2000s, I hadn't been able to gamble at the level that I once did. Not only did I no longer have access to funds like those large limited credit cards I had, but I had also limited myself down to lower financial levels as a way to try and hide my gambling from friends and family. Once I was introduced to betting on credit, a new level of bad decisions got unlocked. Instead of betting on Sundays, I started betting on every single game I could watch. I was betting on games at 1 a.m. for sports I'd never heard of.
He's not my bookie, Nick.
Oh, come on, Ronnie. Admit it, man. You bet on everything. Look, he bets on the Bulls and the Sox, the Cubs. He bet on the Hawaii game. Only degenerates bet on the Hawaii game.
For special gambling events, I would even request off of work, like March Madness. I'd request off every weekend so I could gamble the 63 games of that tournament. Every single one. The pinnacle of special events, of course, the Super Bowl. And one year, I finally got invited to the game I'd heard of for so long. A cash poker game that took place during the Super Bowl. Every so often, the stakes would get raised, and it would go on past the Super Bowl. You could bet on the Super Bowl, and the game did not stop until no one was left at the table. To me, this was a dream. During this special event, which sometimes lasted 48 hours or more, it included no sleep, cigarette smoke, and ham sandwiches, and a person could win or lose thousands. I would often save my money for a month just to prepare myself so I could stay at the table the entire time the game was going. I looked forward to this game more than my own birthday. All of these decisions in my life led to enormous financial swings. But since I didn't have an off switch to control my gambling habits, my losses swallowed me up. I finally lost enough money to seek help again by sharing my troubles with friends and family. This time, however, no one was shocked by my terrible choices and the selfishness that I was exhibiting. I felt like Pigpen from the Peanuts cartoon. Disappointment surrounded me like a cloud. And for the first time ever, I realized I might have had a gambling problem. Let's talk a little bit more about the Super Bowl, the championship game of the National Football League, where every year over 100 million Americans will watch in person or on TV to see the new champion get crowned. In fact, we'll spend over $17 billion on food and items related to the game at our Super Bowl parties. There are a lot of long-standing traditions when it comes to the Super Bowl. A new tradition for many is gambling. The first sports books opened in Las Vegas casinos in 1975. Ever since, Millions of Americans have traveled to Sin City to place wagers on their favorite Super Bowl teams. For more than 4 decades, traveling to Nevada was the only way most sports fans could legally place a bet on the Super Bowl. In 2019, it was estimated that more than 310,000 individuals visited Las Vegas during Super Bowl weekend. A year earlier, in 2018, the championship game was between the Philadelphia Eagles and the New England Patriots, led by Tom Brady. This game attracted bettors to set a record $158 million of wagers on the game, the most money ever placed on a single NFL game. Bettors weren't just trying to predict who would win or lose the big game. Money was also being heavily wagered on proposition bets, or prop bets as they're more commonly known, another way for sportsbooks to create action for the big game. As a prop bettor, someone could choose to risk their money on a number of events surrounding the Super Bowl, including whether or not the coin toss would land on heads or tails, what color Gatorade would be dumped on the winning head coach, and whether or not the singer Pink would take more than 2 minutes to finish the national anthem. For those curious, she did not.
For years, bettors had to flock to Las Vegas to participate in the spectacle of sports betting. There is, however, a new popular place to bet on the big game from your phone, on your couch.
Overall, something like $7.5 billion is expected to be gambled on this Super Bowl Sunday.
If you include the numbers for all of betting done in the U.S. in the 5 years since it's been legalized in those 38 states, an astounding $220 billion have been legally bet on sports by more than 40 million Americans. That is a big piece of the pie to split up between state governments, big business, and sports leagues. And I want to talk about how each one of those groups interacts in the sports gambling landscape. But first, let's talk about the 1992 Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act and understand why it was put in place to prevent sports gambling to begin with.
Are you kidding me? You're going to risk your hard-earned cash?
Take food off your table? Off your table?
Betting on 18-year-old
kids? You might as well.
Throw your money away.
Fool.
So watch our games for this kind of
This kind of action.
Not this.
Not this.
Because if you're banking on me,
To make your day?
don't
bet on it. Don't bet on it.
The PAPSA was put in place for one major reason, because the U.S. government determined and wrote in the act that sports gambling is a national problem. The authors of the act went on to say the harm sports gambling inflicts are felt beyond the borders of those states that sanction it. They weren't alone in their thinking either. The 4 main professional sports leagues, the MLB, NFL, NHL, and NBA, all agreed with this decision at that time. Then NBA Commissioner David Stern even testified to the Senate subcommittee that the interstate ramifications of sports betting are a compelling reason for federal legislation.
By testifying in favor of PASPA in 1992, we had created a great success with fans who were basketball fans and fans of the home team. And I used to say I didn't want Junior to leave the arena unhappy because even though the home team had won, they didn't cover.
Recently, David Stern and other current and former heads of professional sports leagues have all seemed to do an about-face on their opinions surrounding legalized sports betting.
Over time, I've come to accept the notion that a properly run gambling operation, or gaming as we like to say in Las Vegas, is protective.
Their new stance is certainly a quick turnaround on the league's long-held opinions of being anti-sports gambling. Prior to 2019, Stern was quoted as saying it would cause irreparable harm to the NBA and its relationship with the fans. He also wrote, "The NBA cannot be compensated in damages for the harm that sports gambling poses to the fundamental bonds of loyalty and devotion between fans and teams." In 2009, the Big Four sports leagues even filed suit against Delaware when that state tried to legalize sports gambling. As part of the suit the leagues filed, they said legalized sports betting would irreparably harm professional and amateur sports by fostering suspicion and skepticism that individual plays and final scores of games may have been influenced by factors other than honest athletic competition.
Obviously, for 100 years, gambling has been an original sin in baseball. Yet, in the NBA and Major League Baseball, in an odd partnership that they probably never dreamed of, going state to state, not only to go ahead and pass sports gambling, but to give the sports leagues a cut of the action.
Mark Cuban, totally on board, telling CNBC, quote,
I think everyone that owns a top 4 professional sports team saw the value of their team double.
Oh.
The stance of the pro leagues to be anti-legalizations was to protect the integrity of league games.
It's the integrity of the game that everyone's worried about.
The league would like to get a cut, a percentage of all the money that comes in. They're calling this an integrity fee, basically, so that they can go spend money to go to greater lengths
and to police
what's going on. Now, also, that money goes in their pockets.
Oh,
so,
that's
you know, it's.
Oh, I didn't know how that got there.
But even with that stance, each sport had varying levels of gambling scandals that had already tainted their individual leagues' reputations in some way. In Major League Baseball, 8 members of the 1919 Chicago White Sox were banned from baseball for allegations that they conspired to lose the World Series to the Cincinnati Reds that year. The Reds were also at the center of a scandal surrounding MLB all-time hit leader Pete Rose, who was banned from baseball in 1989 for betting on games while he was an MLB manager. More recently, MLB superstar Shohei Ohtani has been embroiled in controversy and investigations surrounding whether or not he bet on games or tried to alter the outcomes in some way. The NFL has already suspended players for betting on games, so has the NHL. The NBA faced a very public scrutiny when a referee named Tim Donaghy served 15 months in prison for arranging a gambling ring where he bet on sports games that he officiated. Corruption, integrity of the game, harm to citizens of our society. These are some of the reasons pro sports leagues and our government stood together years ago to fight against those who tried to bring legalized sports betting to the country. However, today, after the repeal of the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act of 1992, we are seeing a different story being told to us. But how did we get here exactly?
I don't think it's fair that it's restricted to just a few states. Gaming is surrounding us everywhere. And the fact is, you know, I told you, I saw somebody at the Giants game this past weekend, and I said, great win. And he said, yeah, well, the Giants didn't cover, and it blew my parlay. Now, gambling is illegal in New Jersey on sports, as far as I could tell. But I don't think any of us are of the illusion that betting on NFL games isn't happening every week in New Jersey. So let's get that economy out from underground. Let's get it above ground. Let's have the people who want to gamble on sports be able to do so legally. And let's have the people who benefit from it be the people of the state of New Jersey, not criminal organizations across New Jersey.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. Those were the words of Chris Christie, former New Jersey governor and champion of sports betting everywhere. He was recently inducted into the Sports Betting Hall of Fame. 2019 was a good year for Chris Christie. You would think that the Sports Betting Hall of Fame would be reserved for people who maybe won a lot of money on sports betting, but you'd be wrong. The Sports Betting Hall of Fame highlights the businesses and organizational leaders at the front of sports betting, the people who champion the awareness, legislation, and profits of the sports gambling industry.
The Hall awarded this esteemed honor to Chris Christie because he was instrumental in generating the political will to revisit and challenge the federal ban on sports betting via the PASPA. The Hall went on to write, Christie spent more than 7 years fighting for legalized sports betting in his state, and it was his efforts in spearheading the challenge through the federal courts that opened up the door for states across the nation to look at regulating sports betting. After the federal government allowed sports gambling to become legal at a state level, articles from Sports Illustrated and ESPN, among others, began popping up everywhere, showing everyone the changes that were about to come to sports fandom. ESPN went so far to release an article highlighting the winners and losers involved in the legalization of sports betting. They listed 11 winners and 6 losers. Of course, Chris Christie was hailed by ESPN as one of the winners in the newly legal sports betting landscape. But does Sports Illustrated or ESPN or any of the organizations centered around gambling actually think there are losers in terms of the sports betting industry? It's unlikely, because ESPN and other sports-related companies are now able to draw more viewers to games, gain new advertisers, and create their own sports shows, betting apps, and websites as well. All of these things will easily allow all sports fans to bet on sports in the name of recreation. Yes, that's right. ESPN declared the ultimate big winner of sports gambling becoming legalized is the recreational bettor. They define the recreational bettor as someone who will wager $20 on a game at the bar with their friends over drinks. It's clear why Chris Christie fought so hard and spent $8.6 million of taxpayer money to get sports gambling legalized in New Jersey. The first year alone, the state generated $365 million in revenue. They followed that up with $400 million in 2020 and $800 million in 2021. But did the state of New Jersey actually make $800 million off the back of $20 recreational bettors in 2021? Let's do some math. With a population around 9 million, every single citizen of New Jersey would have had to wager and lose nearly $90 in order to reach those kind of revenue numbers. And since we know not everyone in the state is gambling, you might ask, well, where did that revenue come from? Well, the answer, at least in part, is on the backs of newly formed gambling addicts.
New Jersey wants to appropriately regulate sports gaming, and here's why. We want to do it because 65% of the people of the state of New Jersey voted that they want to do it.
Do you think the losing bettors in New Jersey, who helped generate that $800 million in revenue, call themselves winners? Don't be fooled. Some will say this ruling is great for business, the economy, government, schools. It's simply not true. This ruling will allow you, your children, your friends, and everyone you know to be overwhelmed both with advertising as well as easy access to sports betting. Coupled together, sports betting offers you the opportunity not only to win big, but to lose everything. While Hall of Famer Chris Christie might have gotten the train rolling on legalized sports betting in New Jersey, 37 other states have jumped on behind him, and it's easy to understand why.
6 months after sports gambling apps first launched, gamblers here spent more than $316 million in a single month. 2 years later, that monthly number has more than doubled, and more than $22 million went to the state that month as tax revenue.
Spartan teams are never beaten. All through the game they fight. Fight for the only colors, green and white.
College sports has long opposed being involved with sports betting. Nonetheless, over the years, they've had their fair share of scandals, from bribery to point shaving and players even fixing games. Today, however, the NCAA is telling a different story. They're getting into bed with sports gambling companies. Caesars Sportsbook was the first one. In 2022, an agreement with Michigan State allowed them to have naming rights of the Spartan Stadium, as well as signage rights for their baseball team, their hockey team, and their basketball team. In other words, if you're one of the 75,000 fans attending a Spartan Stadium game, Caesars Sportsbook Spartan Stadium game, you'll be bombarded with advertisements and promotional deals marketed at sports gambling, from the concession stand to the bathroom stalls to the field behind me or the big screen TVs that we all watch and look at. They'll also have VIP treatment for people who are involved in their rewards program.
We wanted to make sure everyone was aware of an awesome opportunity to sit in the brand new Caesars Sportsbook Touchdown Club. Now, I'm currently sitting in one of these seats right here, and I can tell you, as far as comfort and views, this is one of the best seats in the house.
And that's crazy because most of the students at Michigan State aren't even of legal age to gamble. If you think the student loan debt has gotten out of control, wait till we add a school-sponsored student gambling debt on top of it.
Why would governments, pro sports leagues, and colleges, who are all morally and vocal opponents against legalized sports gambling for generations, finally change their tune and begin inviting and advertising potentially harmful behaviors amongst their citizens and fans? The answer is simple. Money. Not just money, but legal money, and lots of it. Combining all professional sports in the U.S., they generate about $40 billion annually. Those pro leagues were certainly making enough of a profit for everyone involved, long before introducing sports betting as a new habit to their customers. But at some point, they saw a new cash cow on the horizon, and they sharpened their knives for slaughter. It wasn't that long ago that Major League Baseball and the NFL treated gambling like a plague. Now they have partnership deals with casinos and daily fantasy sports books. The potential of gambling sites to do more sponsorship deals and naming rights for stadiums will provide college and pro teams with a sizable influx of cash to be used on players and facilities. In Major League Baseball, the Arizona Diamondbacks signed a deal with Caesars Entertainment. They developed a sports book, a bar, and a broadcast studio adjacent to their team stadium. I've visited these pro sports stadiums that have sports books attached to them, either at the stadium itself or facilities connected to the team. It's crazy to me that they are steps away from where we take our families. I got 4 young kids. When they see people around them betting on sports that close to them, are they going to be encouraged to do the same thing for themselves? I'm not sure. But what I do want to ask is, who is at the highest risk when it comes to having these sports betting facilities an inch away from where they're rooting for their favorite teams?
Here in New Jersey, outside the Meadowlands, MetLife Stadium, where they have this FanDuel Sportsbook, lots of guys lined up early in the morning to place their bets, hoping things will turn out their way. It has its own food court, bar, lots of places to sit, very comfortable atmosphere, very well put together. Everything is high tech. It is beautiful in there, and a sports lover's dream. Come hang out all day. Make sure your wagers are ready, it said, though.
According to the National Gambling Impact Study, 15 million men, women, and children are considered problem gamblers.
I'll give you the Seahawks plus 6 points for $500. Are you crazy? Maybe for 50. 50? What fun is 50? Why don't we just bet air?
The NCPG have found that anyone can become addicted to gambling, but the most pathological gamblers are males between the ages of 20 and 40. Care to guess who the target demographic is for ESPN and pro sporting leagues across the country? That's right, men between the ages of 18 to 34. So do you see the problem? The people who have the greatest risk of developing a gambling addiction is the target audience for pro sports in America. Sports betting mixed with sports fandom will lead to something called the exposure effect. This is something Dr. Howard Schaefer, who is a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, spoke about in an interview with ESPN regarding sports betting becoming legal. The exposure effect is the idea that the more people who are exposed to gambling, the more people will gamble. The idea that sports betting can have a negative impact on someone's life or cause them to become a gambling addict seems pretty straightforward. But the truth is, between the articles and the interviews of people who are involved in the sports betting world, they're way more concerned with corruption inside sports betting than they are with the negative effects it'll have on an individual's life.
In terms of bribing someone to shave some points, and there's countless examples, is in college sports, particularly college basketball.
Our job is to make sure they're not compromised. How do you do that? You educate them. You see a key player on your team driving a brand new car, you got to find out where that car came from.
In that same article on the exposure effect from ESPN, Dr. Schaefer was quoted as saying, "When sports betting is legalized, young people who have never stepped in a casino or purchased a lottery ticket will try putting money down on a game, and some will develop a gambling problem. Athletes are specifically at risk. Lives, families will be ruined. This risk cannot be overstated."
The number 1 fastest growing addiction in America, online porn. Number 2, online gambling, and most of it is sports.
But I didn't see the money.
We have a cool dude named Caesar doing commercials. Give me a break here.
Unbelievable the amount of money being spent on sports betting.
Funny. I have talked to 25 people in the past handful of months that have lost their families, their businesses, their jobs. Their wife is done, and it's all because he thought he was cute betting football.
ESPN, Yahoo, sports media across the country won't tell stories like mine on their airwaves. They will suppress the stories of addiction and gambling problems in people all across the country. Instead, they're going to focus on the good stories, the stories of people who've won lots of money. And while that might be true, that's not the whole truth. Even though the industry is aware of the potential for sports gambling to destroy lives, they are just getting started in their journey to create $40 billion or more in annual revenue by the year 2025. Do you know what that means? It means that in a few years, we'll see sports betting companies making more in revenue than the professional sports leagues that they support. All of the leagues combined. Not only that, but their revenue is raised by not actually having to contribute to the marketplace. I mean, they don't raise up future sports stars. They don't pay their salaries. I mean, they don't create merchandise apparel for teams or any new or tangible sports-related product. They are a business that can only survive off the back of others. But here's the other side of that, is that Americans have to lose $40 billion for them to make that in revenue.
What are sports bettors going to do when they run into financial trouble? Well, some of them are going to run into places like this. Payday loan companies, title sharks, these are places we go for short-term financial solutions to our problems. They won't address, however, the overall addiction that sports gambling might have on us. For me, at the height of my gambling, I had 12 short-term loans out across the city. Currently, 23 million Americans have a gambling debt. The average debt of those 23 million Americans is $55,000 per person. Can you imagine if your favorite pro sports team or your league asked you to pay $50,000 to watch a season of their games? I don't think many of us would sign up for that, but that's sort of what they're asking us to do when they bombard us with promotions and marketing towards daily fantasy sports and betting on games. Now, you yourself may not have a gambling problem, but statistics say that 1 in 5 Americans have bet on sports. That means you or someone you know could be on their way to financial troubles just because they're a fan of sports.
Are people gambling more as they go to games less?
Yes, for sure. We've seen record BetMGM weeks the last couple of weeks with the NFL and obviously the unprecedented sports of NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, the Kentucky Derby, multiple PGA events. But what you saw was when at the height of the pandemic, all of our resort casinos were closed. The only place that the company was making money was on sports betting and iGaming. And we had people betting on darts and table tennis and Belarusian soccer. So yeah, people want to bet. And I think what's going to happen is coming out of COVID and with shortfalls in state budgets, you're going to see an acceleration of the legalization of sports betting initiatives across the country. And we've been investing in our BetMGM app to make it available to people even when they're not at our properties.
While it might be legal in most states for people to bet on sports, should average Americans be happy that these organizations have allowed so many of us to be put at risk? What if you or someone you love was one of the 23 million Americans who now have a gambling debt because they're betting on a game? A game which, by the way, they never felt the need to bet on before until they started to legalize it, promote it, and market it.
Here in Connecticut, outside an establishment called Winners, it's set up for horse betting and sports betting. A lively bunch in there, all wagering on different games and matches. This is the best entryway to any sports book that I've seen so far. Rotating globe.
Since 2019, I have traveled to many of the 38 states that have legalized sports gambling in our country. Right now, I'm at the Hollywood Casino in the heartland of America, Kansas City. I really wanted to understand the culture of sports betting that is now taking place in America. One of the things I've noticed is that many of the amenities and the things that are offered by these sports books are pretty much the same. However, this is all for the case of the recreational bettor, right? Well, why does this casino have a line specifically for people who want to wager over $5,000? And why do so many of these establishments have pamphlets like these telling people to know their limits? The one thing I've learned at all these places is that even though the amenities and the things might be the same, they all offer one thing in particular: the opportunity to change your life.
My name is Andrew Walker. I live in Madisonville, Kentucky. First forms of gambling I ever participated in would be poker. Starting out playing, with friends, home games. That evolved into online poker. Then I would go into sports gambling from there. I first started betting on sports when I was in college. A buddy of mine in college found a site where you could, bet on horse races. Being in Kentucky, horse racing is very popular. And I thought that was cool because I didn't realize that, in the middle of the night there were horse races going on in Japan or something that you could bet on. So, that was something pretty neat because you could, do it anytime. Probably the sport I bet most was baseball. Felt I had the best knowledge of that. Of course, it's, nobody's, knows what's going to happen, but I felt like I had the better hold on MLB baseball. I was always a fan of the Cincinnati Reds, and I followed them. Start out, betting on their games and then betting on games in their division. So I was familiar with the teams they played a lot, the Cardinals, the Cubs. So I bet on those games, and then from there, I started, just betting on any game. I started out making bets. I would deposit, $100, $200 when I was in, college. Just, money I should be using, to eat on or stuff. I would put on an online site, and then usually bet per game like $10. When you start out, you win a couple bets, you think, hey, I'm good at this, which is silly, but you think, oh, okay, I'm gonna bet a little bit more this time, and gonna bet a little bit more now. So, and it's that's where you get sucked in. I would think long and hard, place the bet, be like, okay, let's see what happens. Watch a game, and be, abnormally interested in this game that normally I wouldn't be interested in. My favorite part of betting was just the thrill of winning on a bet that was placed. Especially if your team was down, you thought you were going to lose. You're like, oh man, I lost this bet, and then they come back. You're like, hey, yeah, it's the thrill of that is what was most exciting for me. It was definitely the money that drew me to playing. It was, I always wanted to, get a quick dollar. I would start out depositing $100. A couple years later, that would be $200 or $300. A couple years later, it was a slow progression. Then ended up, being, I think the most I ever deposited was $1,000.
It's worth noting that Gamblers Anonymous and other problem gambling organizations will tell people to leave the dollar amounts out of the stories that they tell. The reason is because Andrew and others like him will compare their losses to the story they just heard. For instance, where Andrew might lose $1,000, and that's a lot of money to him, it may not be a lot to someone else. And because of that, an individual might hear Andrew's story or another problem gambler story and think they don't have a problem because either they don't gamble as much as the person they just heard, or because losing $1,000 isn't that big of a deal to them because they gamble at higher stakes. The truth is, though, sports gambling has the potential to be a risk for people at all financial levels.
My name is Matt Edwards. I grew up a Cardinals fan. I remember being at the 1985 World Series when Ozzie hit it to right with my dad.
Smith corks one into right down the line. It may go. Go crazy, folks. Go crazy.
I was 6 years old. I've been to every single home playoff game since that game. We being my group of friends and I, we started gambling on sports. It was basketball, it was football, baseball for sure. And we just bet. And it wasn't that big of a deal when it started out. But as I started making more money, I was running my own company, I started gambling more. And then I decided it's not worth my time to study these games if I'm not making X. Well, X was maybe $100 in my younger career, and X became $1,000, and X could be $10,000. And it just grows.
For both Matt and Andrew, studying the games they were betting became a major part of their addiction.
I want to make a six-way parlay. Celtics, Sixers game. What's the line?
Still +1.
+1, okay. So I want the Celtics to cover. I want the Celtics halftime. I want Garnett points and rebounds. Garnett block shots. Celtics opening tip. Do you take lightning bets?
Yeah, but you don't want any part of lightning bets.
Fine.
Come on.
$1,000 a point, okay?
A sharp bettor is a term created by the sports gambling industry to define someone who is seen by others as a long-term winning bettor. Sharps, as they're called, are often well respected within the community and will often move the action on a particular game if the public knows what they are betting. For those caught up in sports betting, everybody wants to consider themselves a sharp bettor. But how can everybody be a sharp bettor? And also, are sharp bettors putting more than their money at risk?
You'll study way too long. And that's part of the problem, is that you spend more time than you realize researching games when you could be spending on something much more productive in your life. I have a friend out in LA that owns horses, and he usually has a pretty good idea on the major races of what to bet on, but I'd always play his play. He eventually hit one, and it won $17,000. This is a part that makes me really reflect on what am I doing, because I was afraid to go pick up the $17,000. I had my kids that day, so I went to my friend's house. He grabbed his gun. He rode in the car with me and my kids, and he kept an eye on us while my kids and I went into the gas station in East St. Louis and picked up $17,000. And looking back on that's nothing for a kid to be doing.
I talked to the New York Council on Problem Gambling 1 month after they legalized sports betting in New York State. What they told me, the call center, where people call when they have a gambling problem, it went up 8,000% from the previous month. And you'd be surprised, it wasn't problem gamblers calling for help. It was the wives, girlfriends, and mothers of people with a gambling problem calling, reaching out, trying to figure out what to do. and most of them were in shock when they found out that legalized sports betting was now the #1 problem in their family's life.
Andrew and I have been married for 11 years. I did not realize that there was an addiction with the sports gambling. I knew a couple of times when he would talk with like his brother or a couple of friends, and they would talk about, you know, the stats on a game or something like that. Like, I knew he was putting some money on there, but I thought maybe it was $5, $10, $20. So I didn't realize the extent of the bet.
I mean, I would tell her very little, very vaguely what I was doing. You know, I was never transparent with her. This is how much I'm, you know, depositing. This is how much I'm betting on this game. You know, nothing like that. So I was ashamed that I was, you know, taking money, like I said, that we could spend on us, spend on the kids, and I was, you know, basically wasting it.
When I checked our bank account one night just to make sure that my paycheck was deposited, and there was $20,000 in our bank account. It's like, I start panicking that there's been some mistake. We've got $20,000, and he said it's a consolidated loan. Because we have credit card debt, we're going to use this consolidated loan to pay that back. I didn't realize we were in credit card debt because I never saw credit cards come through the mail. I never saw a bill come through the mail. So I was just immediately terrified. And I'm pretty sure the next day I had texted him and said, "You are going to make us homeless and we are going to be bankrupt if you do not stop whatever you're doing with these credit cards." But when I sat down and talked with him about my concerns with our money with his family, that's when he finally explained it's gambling on games. This is where our money is going. Then I realized that was the root of all evil. When I found out exactly what had been happening with the sports gambling, I was upset, I was disappointed, I was angry, I was a little resentful. But then it kind of opened my eyes to why our relationship was in that place for so long and what was really holding us back from being who we really could be together.
Gambling pulls you away from basics of just being 100% present for your family. Those moments aren't presented to you because you're not aware of the moments. You're into your own thing too much. It was a big thing for my now wife, who was my girlfriend and fiance, how much I was looking at my phone to gamble and being on the phone and checking my phone at dinner and all that. That helps push you away if you have somebody there reminding you, because it's a full addiction.
I thought the first time I told my family that I had a gambling addiction was one of the toughest seasons of my life. I can still remember the conversations we had, the words that were said, and the tears that my mom shed, especially hers. The problem is that I didn't stop gambling right away, and that I would continually have to have these conversations with my family and friends year after year. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't stop gambling. And it seemed like no matter what I did, I continued to hurt the people that I love over and over again.
And as you get going and money becomes more available to you, you're putting your family's money at risk on something you have zero control over. And in the end, you realize you just don't win, but you always want to chase and try to win.
You know, my heart dropped, you know, just when, you know, we're having these arguments about the money, and it's, you know, she makes comments, you know, about, you know, what it's doing to our family. And it was, you know, just full of shame, full of embarrassment. It just felt terrible for what I'd done.
Sports fandom is growing larger than ever before. Licensed team apparel, with advertisers on the jersey, they make more than $20 billion annually, and that number keeps growing. Attendance at stadiums like this among all pro sports is at an all-time high. Because of the recent streaming revolution and also the digital distribution of sports, Gen Z and millennials are watching sports at greater numbers than baby boomers and Gen X. And there's a reason for that. The greatest change in sports fandom over the last 10 years or so? The smartphone.
While those baby boomers and Gen Xers might remember buying real paper tickets and sitting on hot bleacher seats, today's younger sports fan, they'll remember subscribing to Apple TV to follow Major League Soccer and watching the NBA Finals on YouTube TV from the comfort of their own home. Since the beginning of pro sports in America, big business has cozied up alongside sports leagues, offering their cash in exchange for their logos on the field, commercials highlighting goods and services between periods, and by sponsoring various segments of sporting events. For generations, however, the relationships between pro sports and big business were separate in the types of products they were selling. It's like this. MLB creates baseball games. They attract an audience to those games, and McDonald's sees that audience and wants to advertise their hamburgers to that audience. But the two companies are separate, even though they are partnered together. McDonald's doesn't tell baseball games how to run themselves, and baseball doesn't tell McDonald's how to make cheeseburgers. And for years, this is how the interaction between big business and the pro leagues went on. Today, though, thanks to the introduction of legalized sports betting, a new type of relationship has begun to develop. One where the pro sports leagues and the advertisers they are in bed together have created a new type of advertising love child. If you have seen any televised sporting event recently, you have likely seen an advertisement for FanDuel or DraftKings. These are the two big business leaders in today's legalized sports gambling world. They offer a variety of ways for sports fans to gamble on the sports they love. These advertisements are not limited to your TV, though. You may hear them on the radio, even at the games themselves. FanDuel even has its own channel. And for those who don't watch sports, don't worry, because sports gambling ads are among the top advertisements seen by U.S. citizens across all forms of media.
I need help with a fantasy football team because DraftKings sponsored this video.
What that means is, even if you don't follow sports, you've likely seen an advertisement for sports gambling on your favorite YouTube channel, like this one that does videos for the music industry, or maybe on your favorite podcast. Currently, one of America's most popular podcasts is the Joe Rogan Experience. And on that show, they promote DraftKings to their average audience of around 11 million people per episode.
And most people are just not that sophisticated when it comes to these things. If they're betting using an app or something like that, betting online, they're just doing it for fun. They think they could win. They got a feeling. They want to bet their team. They want to make the game more exciting.
And while DraftKings has been a longtime sponsor of his show, Joe Rogan and his guests have discussed their views on sports gambling on many occasions.
And just in the last 5 years, we have sports betting on your phone in many states. So it couldn't be easier. So what does that mean? It means it's going to wreck people who would never have been available to before. You see it, okay? You see the people who can't stop.
Right.
Who know they don't have this money, who know they're going to the credit card advance machine for the 5th time, that weekend. They can't stop.
So is the solution that we just have to have more people available for counseling and more rehabilitation centers?
Even on Joe Rogan's show, where he is benefited financially from a relationship with DraftKings, has shared the opinion that there might be some risk involved from people who participate in sports gambling activities. This opinion seems to be the minority, though, because big business will tell you that sports gambling is good, and they will not highlight the bad stories that come out of it. Instead, they just want to continue to promote and advertise all the good things that will come from their company. How do they do that exactly? Well, look at promotions like this, where Scott H. just won $5 million playing FanDuel. Advertisers will, however, put a teeny tiny sentence at the bottom of their ads telling people to gamble responsibly. It's almost identical to drug ads, who highlight the possible side effects of a particular drug. In both of those businesses, they only put those disclaimers in their advertisements because they are legally obligated to do so. Here is an example of what you will never see on a DraftKings or a FanDuel commercial.
I turned $35 into $2 million into $40 into $0 on FanDuel.
Daily fantasy is the best. I get to play every day.
You mean you get to gamble?
It's not gambling.
Oh, it's definitely gambling. You have a massive gambling problem.
It's actually a skills-based game that is going to make us rich one day.
You're an idiot.
Daily Fantasy has the support of the NFL. When have they ever been associated with anything shady?
You spent $1,200.
Well, that's what you got to do. You got to spend money to make money.
To make $6.18, you spent $1,200.
Yeah, that's how it works. Look at the size of this check.
I'm gonna go with the check.
Look at this check.
$1,200, and you won $6.18.
Daily Fantasy now. Just use promo code GAMBLING, or promo code OBVIOusly gambling, or promo code exploiting a legal loophole, but by any common sense definition, this is gambling.
Let's get back to the relationship between big business and pro sports. In 2021, the NFL announced their first ever sportsbook partnership. They said, as the sports betting landscape has continued to evolve in the United States, we have been thoughtful with our strategy and are excited to announce partners who share the NFL's vision and goals. The vision and goals of the NFL to get you to bet on their games. Isn't it interesting that it was the chief revenue officer who made that quote? But eventually the CEO, Matt King of FanDuel, did chime in and say, this partnership provides our shared customers with a new level of innovation and unmatched premium content directly within our platform, ultimately enhancing every game day. Did you hear what he said? Shared partnerships. This is the key word here. This is the new normal of sports fandom. Sports betting, sports fandom mixed together. It's not just the pro leagues, though. Big businesses like Disney have gotten into the game too. Disney used to own a percentage of DraftKings before they recently sold their stake to sign a $2 billion deal with Penn Gaming. Disney, which owns ABC, Hulu, ESPN, and more, is planning on launching products, shows, and services to cater to sports gamblers. They will soon begin operation of ESPN Bet, which is their own sportsbook. The network that once showed sports highlights and never talked about the gambling odds of a game to maintain the integrity of the sport, now show betting lines and have shows dedicated to gambling discussions. They'll soon be airing Monday Night Football while at the same time taking viewer bets on the outcome of the game. This has caused many fans to be concerned that the outcomes of games will soon be at risk, with matches turning into scripted television similar to pro wrestling. Sports fans today have access to games, scores, commentaries, sports networks, and social media feeds of the players themselves. Fans today, maybe more than ever before, really feel like they're part of the pro sports community.
Not just a fan, but an active participant. The most popular form of sports gambling today is a form most people don't even consider gambling: fantasy sports. Home run!
Modern fantasy sports was invented in the 1980s by fans of Major League Baseball. Originally, it was called rotisserie baseball. A group of 10 fans would become managers themselves by drafting real players to their fantasy team. They would then compete against managers of the other 9 teams. Each week begins a new game, as real player stats were recorded from numbers printed in Sporting News magazine. For instance, if Ozzie Smith was on your team and got a home run in real life that week with the St. Louis Cardinals, the Ozzie Smith on your fantasy team also got credit for a home run. The origins of fantasy sports were modest. Friends who loved baseball created a way to compete against one another for fun. No real money was involved. However, as other baseball fans learned about rotisserie baseball, leagues began to sprout up in cities across the country. Entry fees soon followed. Fantasy team owners would buy into a league where the champion of each year would be awarded not only with the trophy, but real money.
I'm Peyton Manning, and this is what I play for.
This is where the history of gambling on fantasy sports becomes interesting. Because let's say you bought into a fantasy league for $100, and that league lasts for several months. Is that considered gambling, considering the nominal cash prize you might win at the end? Or is it an investment to keep managers of your league invested in the outcome so that those people who are losing don't give up? Or is it like buying a concert ticket, where you use your $100 sort of as an entry fee to go and do something you want to do? A decade or two ago, I think you might have had a case that the buy-in for a fantasy sports season, which lasted months, is similar to buying a concert ticket or maybe a fancy night out. But today's daily fantasy leagues is so far removed from the slow-paced, methodical grind of the rotisserie leagues of the 80s. And just with the growth of the internet, fantasy sports is in every major professional sport. But it was in 1997 that the boom really started, when CBS launched the first ever online NFL Fantasy League.
I play quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. I also play in the Bronx Fat Guys League.
I'm part of the Chicken Monkeys, the most dominant fantasy football franchise in South Florida.
My owner here, Joe,
works tirelessly throughout the year to improve the prowling Purple Pandas.
This was the first time you saw people be able to form teams and play strangers from across the country in different buy-in amounts. And for the next 20 years, 60 million Americans signed up to play. 4 out of 5 of those people were managing NFL fantasy teams. Today, the 2 biggest fantasy sports companies are, not surprisingly, FanDuel and DraftKings. FanDuel was founded in Scotland in 2009 as a fantasy sports provider, pitting fantasy league winners across the country against one another for huge cash prizes. But the big vision of FanDuel was much larger. From the beginning, they believed commitment to long seasons of fantasy sports was an issue, and they were the first to create daily fantasy leagues. While they marketed them as a social game, the goal was to tap into the gambling side of fantasy sports, which coincided with the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act of 2006. This act blocked gambling online in states where gambling was illegal, but exempted online fantasy sports company from the ruling as long as the fantasy sports are based on a team of multiple athletes from real-world teams and have prizes that have been established before the event starts. In other words, FanDuel used real players and predetermined cash prizes to create games of skill. And if a person bought into those games of skill, even up to 10 times a day, it still was not considered gambling. FanDuel, and a few years later DraftKings, grew their companies very large as a result. They raised hundreds of millions of dollars in venture capital, and they used a lot of that money to build software and apps that outshined every other fantasy sports website. In 2015, DraftKings entered into a 3-year deal with ESPN and Fox Sports to integrate their marketing into the television and digital content for around $500 million. But remember, in 2015, in almost 95% of America, online and sports gambling was illegal. But it was around this time that the sports betting advertising that is so prevalent in today's sports world got its start.
Giant Check is no myth, no mirage, no fool's gold. It's our trophy, and many hoist it playing our one-week games.
It's worth noting, interestingly, that around the same time that daily fantasy sports and pro sports are really getting together for the first time, the government started to have some distrust among these two organizations getting together. New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman even opened an inquiry around the partnerships of these two groups.
Daily fantasy sports were exempted from a 2006 federal law that banned online gambling after claiming the contests are a game of skill. But with recent accusations of insider trading and a bombardment of television ads, investigators and legislators are changing the rulebook.
To this day, there have been stories and accusations that pro sports has some level of behind-the-scenes manipulation of the scores and outcome of games. And while the pro leagues themselves, as well as fantasy sports companies, have issued statements saying nothing is more important than the integrity of the games we offer to our customers, it's clear that distrust, at least on some level, is in the air. And while FanDuel and DraftKings may have started as fantasy sports companies, they have not stayed there. Since the legalization of sports gambling federally, these two companies have opened up their own sports books.
You're on the road to betting legally on same-game parlays, spreads, money lines, props, and more. Anytime and anywhere across the state. So get hyped, Ohio. Soon you can start betting on all your favorite sports.
They've also lobbied for sports betting amendments to get added to the 12 states yet to legalize, including my home state of Missouri, where they are throwing money behind bait-and-switch political ads to gain support from the community.
The campaign to legalize sports betting, Winning for Missouri Education, has been focusing on where the money will go instead of the actual betting.
Will generate over $100 million for our schools.
But a new ad out from the opposition claims it would be much less.
Amendment 2 would allow them to pay 0 gaming taxes to Missouri. That means $0 for Missouri schools.
And these fights are just beginning. According to campaign finance documents, the parent companies of both FanDuel and DraftKings just pumped an additional $5 million each into the campaign for Amendment 2 in the past week.
These two companies have a combined value of $50 billion. They are using their enormous pile of cash to impact elections, build casinos, and daily fantasy apps. What will it mean for average sports fans in Missouri or other states if FanDuel and DraftKings lobbying and their efforts to expand their business into other areas is successful? Is it no longer good enough just to catch a couple local baseball games or have a couple basketball jerseys in your closet? Or does the average sports fan today have to have the NFL package, bet on a game, and be a manager of a football team. And I already know some fantasy team managers enjoy watching all the games. They love the thrill of competition with fantasy sports, and I get it. But fantasy sports was originally created to be a season-long competition. In today's right now TikTok world, these two companies alone created a right now form of fantasy sports. That means you'll either win or lose by the end of the day. So let me ask you this question. Is fantasy sports still a game of skill, or has it turned into something else?
Often marketed to lower income families, the lottery is a legal government tool to raise money. This highway sign is a beacon of hope for many people in neighborhoods dreaming of a better life. Today, however, sports gambling seems to be the new way for local governments to raise money for their coffers.
Are people coming and placing sports bets? How busy is it?
Yeah, it's pretty busy, actually. It's very exciting. Delaware, once again, is the first state. We were the state that started the nation back in 1787, and today we'll be the first state outside of Las Vegas to allow sports betting legally, and we're excited to do that. We think it adds another thing for people to do when they're visiting our state.
Sports gambling also offers something that casinos and lotteries cannot. It reaches into a whole new market of untapped bettors, the middle and upper class. These are people with money who may not see sports betting as a lottery that is impossible to win, but rather a game of skill, combined with a form of entertainment they are already involved in. I mean, getting college graduates who already root for their alma mater to add sports betting to their weekend activities should be like shooting fish in a barrel. Likewise, entire cities of people whose identities are wrapped up in their local pro sports teams are prime meat for the sports betting butcher. I mean, what better way is there to support your local team than to bet on them? Like the predatory advertising we've seen used in state-run lotteries that aim at low-income families, gambling ads will now begin to pop up in better neighborhoods, this time with a new kind of promotion, free bets.
And if you download now, DraftKings will match your first bet instantly up to $200.
Thanks, Dr. DraftKings. I can use some extra cash.
Like you really need it.
In their deal with the NFL, FanDuel said the company will also engage with fans through NFL-themed free-to-play games. During my travels across the country, I have seen so many advertisements surrounding free bets, or sometimes no-sweat bets as they're called. These free bets allow you to deposit or use real money to place a bet while getting a matching bet incentive in return.
No matter how you use it, if your bet doesn't win, at least it didn't cost you anything.
Free play in sports gambling is the easiest way to make someone feel like they've won something without actually giving them anything. Here's what sports betting companies are facing. Many people might be scared to bet. They might see the giant screens with all the numbers and the names on it and be a little intimidated. It's not like going up to the blackjack table where you know that all you have to do is get as close to 21 without going over. It takes a little bit more to explain. Because in sports betting, you can make bets on the money line, point spreads, over and unders, parlays, futures, prop bets, and more. Not to mention that you'll probably want to understand what the vig or the juice is. There are so many ways to bet on sports, and that is why companies offer attractive promotions like free play to allow new bettors to learn how to participate without risking anything. And by the way, the government gives tax breaks to sports betting companies who use free bets as a marketing promotion. Now, when I was growing up, when you got something for free from someone and it was a sort of illicit activity, it was to get you on the hook for something to get you to like it. Is sports betting like drugs? While these marketing promotions make it seem like you are guaranteed not to lose, and that may be the case for one bet, there are hoops to jump through in small print behind all those promotions, including limits on how much you can win back. In addition, the reason for these risk-free betting promotions is twofold. The first reason is to make sports betting feel safe. The second reason, and maybe more important, is to get people who've never bet on games to be part of the new culture of sports fandom. The reality is that most people who bet on sports once will find themselves doing so again, and the second bet they make is at risk. But these companies never put that on a billboard. Instead, they'll continue to find ways to make that high barrier of entry just a little bit lower. Even in Las Vegas, where sports betting was already legal, I saw the immense changes and intentional focus that casinos are now putting into place with the hopes of attracting new visitors into their sportsbooks.
This is the MGM Grand Sportsbook.
The first of those changes I saw were the sports betting teachers outside the front door of many of the sports books in Vegas. and almost every casino has their own sportsbook. There were employees of the casino standing there to offer free plays to those who had never bet on sports before, as well as offering them lessons on how to make the various sports bets. This is a version of something I saw in almost every casino I visited, any racetrack, any sports book at all. A guide on how to bet. 10 or 15 pages, and they vary by casino, on all the different sports bets that you can take. And of course, they show you the culture of sports fandom and what it looks like. These guides are not an easy read, by the way. Each page is filled with tiny text describing the different things that you might be able to put your money on. It even has a glossary for people who've never heard these terms before. Again, this is because sports books and the companies that own them want to make gambling on sports as simple and easy a process as they can. In addition, they use celebrities to charm customers. Vegas, when I was there, was plastered with pictures of Jamie Foxx and JB Smoove, encouraging people to bet on sports at every corner. I saw so many sports betting ads the week I was in Vegas. I think I saw Jamie Foxx more than I saw my own wife. And most of these ads were promoting sportsbook apps. Digital betting is the big push for both sports leagues and the gambling businesses they are partnered with. In some states, like Vermont, legalized sports betting can only be done through an app. The companies behind these apps push them so hard because they know if they can get the average sports fan to download their app, they can probably get that same average sports fan to make a bet. America isn't the first country to legalize sports betting within its borders, but it is the most recent, and we may not yet have the long-term data on the impact sports gambling will have on the country and its citizens, but we can look at some other countries to see how it's turned out for them. Most European countries have legalized gambling and sports betting. The UK legalized sports betting in 1960. Soccer, or football as they call it, being the #1 sports of bettors in the region, accounting for 40% of betting action. Sports betting on other games like cricket, tennis, golf, and rugby fill the daily action for sites like Bet365, who leads the market share for sportsbooks and online gambling companies that take action for bettors throughout Europe. Sports betting brings in more than $15 billion in revenue, and according to the UK Gambling Commission, 25% of the British population gambles online each month. And a regulatory report also suggests that nearly 3% of people in Great Britain have a gambling problem.
My name's Craig Atkins, and I live in the UK, in Berkshire, just west of Heathrow, in just near London. In every high street, there's probably 5 or 6 bookmakers. As soon as I was old enough to go into those places, I was probably going into those 3 or 4 times a day. I couldn't walk past one without being tempted in. The worst it got at one point was I spent £500, which was a week's salary to me at that point, on one player to score the next goal. And I spent 12,000 English pounds on just general gambling with casinos and bookmakers in one single month. And I got through 3 credit cards, completely wiped me out. And I had to go to my father to open up to him and say, look, I've got a gambling problem and I need some help. And then, eventually I had to sell my house to pay the debt back and start my journey to recovery.
While the sports betting industry continues to grow in regions outside of the U.S., government bodies have recognized that there are many people who have been negatively impacted due to sports betting.
At the start of this year's World Cup, which of course Germany won, Singapore produced a powerful anti-gambling commercial.
I really can't wait for the World Cup. Who do you think's gonna win it? My dad said Brazil will win. How about you, Andy?
I hope Germany will win.
Why?
My dad bet all my savings on them.
For years, there have been efforts at reform among European and Asian countries who feel that many of their citizens are vulnerable. As of 2023, the Netherlands has prohibited all forms of advertising and sponsorship for online gambling. In Ireland, they report 1 in 30 people in their population have a gambling problem. They've tried to remove gambling advertisements altogether from their forms of media.
I'm an All-Ireland winning footballer for Tyrone.
I've won 8 with Kilkenny.
I'm a gambling addict.
I'm a gambling addict.
You are not alone.
And there is help for you.
In countries where legalized sports betting has been around for a while, you see an increase of gambling-related suicide death. It's clear many European countries have realized the impact legalized sports betting and their advertisements are having on citizens. Meanwhile, in the U.S., state governments are quick to legalize sports betting, and it doesn't seem like they're having a lot of forethought into what's going to happen to the people within their borders, especially men, as this goes on down the road. Thankfully, there have been a few efforts within U.S. Congress, including the Betting Our Future Act, which proposed prohibition of online sports betting advertisements. Unfortunately, the bill, which was sponsored by Congressman Paul Tonko, found no sponsors and zero support.
When the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, gave the states the opportunity to go forward with mobile sports gambling, it's created a Wild West environment. No restrictions, no guardrails.
So for now, it's clear that sports gambling in the U.S. will continue to grow, and we can only watch to see the long-term effects that legalized sports gambling will have on our country. What we won't have to wait to see are the very human stories of people and families who have been negatively impacted because a sports fan was transformed into a sports bettor. How many lives will be ruined before the U.S. steps up and helps people who've been negatively impacted by sports gambling and enables methods for them to get help?
Ask yourself if either or both of the following questions are accurate. Have you felt the need to bet more and more money? Have you ever lied to people important to you about how much you gambled? If your answer is yes to either of these questions, free help is available.
Today, government programs like 1-888-BETS-OFF and other organizations are set up to help problem gamblers, but they take a neutral position on whether or not sports betting is actually bad for its citizens. Instead, they say they can only advocate for the people with the problem. These programs, which have names like Council for Problem Gambling, are often state-funded, which essentially means that the person, or in this case the government, that legalized sports betting in your state is also charged with helping you in your recovery. Doesn't this seem like a conflict of interest? Could you imagine on a corner where they sell drugs and the same people that sold them set up a hospital rehab for drug addicts next door? Yet there are programs to help problem gamblers in every state because they know people will have gambling problems. And that is why sports betting was mostly illegal until 2019. But if you're selling a product that doesn't cause someone long-term harm, do you have to set up a rehab facility? I've never seen a roller coaster rehab facility next to Six Flags or Disneyland. When I was deep in my gambling problem, I called 1-888-BETS-OFF, and that led me to a government-subsidized program to help problem gamblers just like me find help. I personally went to Gamblers Anonymous meetings in my hometown. I was also given free counseling session at a local treatment center. And that is ultimately what led to my breaking free from addiction, but it was not because the government-subsidized program worked as intended.
Jesus got introduced to my life officially about 3 years ago, when you start surrounding yourself with people in the Word and how present the Word becomes in your life. So I now read the Bible every single night. I pray all the time. I give all my praise to Him. And I think it comes back in reward. You're never going to get rich gambling, but you always think you can. And you're always hoping to get somewhere where you're probably not going to get to. And I've just been down that tube for so long that I've seen it in my own life for 24 years. My hope for my future is no gambling, and it's just being the best man I can be in the eyes of above, and it's just being a servant. Maybe someday my hope is that I can just watch the NFL and not think about gambling. But right now I think it's too fresh to where I just occupy myself on Sundays by going to church and doing activities with my kids and what have you.
I got baptized, and the day I got baptized, God cleansed me of any urge to gamble on the 3rd of February. That's a wonderful day I'll never forget, because I've never had an urge to gamble since that day, and now I want to help people like yourself. Essentially, what it really comes down to is you need to break that vicious circle, and for me, there's only one thing that can do that, and that's Jesus.
The first couple of consolidated loans that hit our bank account, I was not comfortable, so I withdrew
That's an understatement.
You were the queen of understatement. We had a rough past.
I was not comfortable.
I almost killed him while he was asleep.
I withdrew a little bit. We had a disagreement.
$62,447.16 was our total debt amount. I knew I was done gambling, so I was looking for, answers, as far as, how do I fix this problem? How do I get out of this hole? When I first learned about Dave Ramsey, I was hooked. I was like all in. I saw this vision, this plan to get out of the mess I created. So we jumped right in and started seeing progress immediately, and just kept going forward.
I would see like a weight off of his shoulders every time he would say, I just paid off this debt, I just paid off this debt. And there was like that light back in his eyes again.
Understandably, it took a while to gain that trust back from my wife and my parents and everyone really that, had, learned about this problem I had. I'd seen, like I said, I'd seen that pain in my wife's eyes, and I never wanted to see that again. I was going to do everything it took to not go back. I feel like now I'm able to be that better father and husband. My mind is not constantly consumed with, the scores and stats, and my mind is more clear and able to focus on them and focus on just making a better life for myself and my family. It's a great feeling now knowing that I was able to break those chains and break that addiction.
My favorite Bible verse is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans that I have for you, plans to prosper, never to perish. That was always my big thing. Like, I know it's hard now, but he's not doing this to us, he's doing this for us to grow together. Our relationship has definitely gotten so much stronger going through this together. It wasn't just him fixing himself, because I wasn't perfect either. It was both of us working together towards this goal for us, for our kids. I'm just proud of him.
Count it down. Let's hear a debt-free scream. 3, 2, 1. We're debt-free!
Was this the life I was meant to have? I remember asking myself that question a few months after my 29th birthday in 2012. I hadn't done any of the things I thought I would do as a young man. I didn't become the Karate Kid, I didn't become a rock star, and I did not have a career in radio. Everything I wanted to do growing up was replaced by an obsession with sports betting. Every game, every hour, a new chance to turn my life around. But for what? So I was sitting there in rehab, talking to my counselor. I'd been clean for 90 days. I was so excited, but I had a question because the thought to stop gambling never entered my mind. The thoughts were always about go gamble, go gamble, go gamble, and I was so confused because I thought I was going into rehab. I called the bets off number. I was supposed to get help, but the idea to stop gambling had never left me. Instead, in those 90 days, I just smoked a lot of cigarettes. I watched a lot of movies. I slept a whole lot. I ate. Anytime the thought of gambling came to my mind, to just try and stop it. But when I talked to my counselor about it, he said, you got to learn to live 15 minutes at a time. He told me to repeat the Serenity Prayer. And that was a really tough pill for me to swallow, because in the moment I remember thinking I'd rather gamble and deal with the consequences than to live a life where every moment of it was consumed with thoughts of gambling and I could not do it. So I left that counseling session and I went on a bender 8 days. I lost everything that wasn't tied down in my apartment, every dollar to my name. And it was in that moment that suicide was really my only thought. I didn't see a way out other than that. So I sat on the edge of my bed as an adult and cried out to God, if you're real, I need you to show me a future and a hope for my life, because I just don't see one anymore. And it was at that moment that I heard words start going on in my mind that I'd never heard before. The kingdom of heaven is upon you. The kingdom of heaven is upon you. It just kept repeating. I thought that I was hearing voices. And I ran away from the darkness of that bedroom into the light of my living room. And I picked up the Bible, belonged to my dad. He died when I was little. And I just started reading the New Testament. And a few chapters into the very first book of the New Testament, the book of Matthew, it said, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is upon you. And in that moment, I knew God was real, that he was talking to me, and somehow I just knew that my life would be better. So that night I repented. I didn't know what that meant, but I just kept saying, I'm so sorry, God. I've really messed this up. Nothing I've done has worked. I'm tired of doing it this way. And as I continued to say those things out loud, and I was reading the story of Jesus and what he had done on the cross for me, I thought, if this guy's willing to die for me, I'm willing to live for him. And I just could feel the weight of my problems falling off of my shoulders. And the months and weeks that followed, and my relationship with Jesus grew stronger. The addiction that was on my back for so many years that I'd tried so many ways to break free of was suddenly released. And I found myself living an entirely different lifestyle. My story of redemption started when I knew I was wrong and I cried out for help. The days and the weeks that followed were not easy. I still owed money to many people. I would even occasionally gamble for months until I was finally delivered the spring after I got saved. In that same year, God also allowed me to find freedom from smoking, cursing, and drinking. My life had an incredible turnaround. I mean, really. I met my wife, I started a ministry, I had 4 children, and a few years later, after following Dave Ramsey, my family and I got debt-free for the first time in my entire life. I went from wasting every dollar I could get my hands on to managing my family finances, my ministry finances, and being trusted with the finances at my church. But I know not everyone will find hope from addiction through Jesus, although I would personally recommend that solution. For others, I believe hope can be found through the realization of your problems and the hard steps to work them out. Maybe that's through GA meetings, counseling, or some other program that will encourage you on your journey to freedom. It will be hard, but I know it is possible. And for the families of those who are dealing with this problem, don't give up on them. God has so much more for them, and that no matter how dire the circumstances, someone can find hope and break free of addiction and find their lives changed not too far from today. I saw it myself, and I know how tough it can be to watch your family members seem to ruin their life. But the best thing my friends and family ever did for me was tough love. No more money, no more help except praying for me. Until those things happened, I believe I would have persisted in my addiction even longer. There was a time in my life where most of the people in my life didn't believe my life could get better. I'd lost a fiance, my best friends had stopped talking to me, I'd broken the trust of my family, I had done everything I could to hurt those closest to me. But today, those who are now closest to me, many of whom didn't know me before I met Jesus, also have a hard time believing that the person I'm describing in this film is the same person they know and love today. I know there is hope for you today because I found hope through Jesus. And I know that's the plan he has for all of us. A future and a hope. It says our lives can overflow with hope in Romans 15:13 if we put our trust in him. If you're lacking peace today, if you're lacking hope today, if you need someone to put your trust into, maybe it's time to consider Jesus as the answer to this addiction. I asked for forgiveness of my sins and started a personal relationship with Jesus as my Lord and Savior. I trusted him and started to do what his word asked of me. I now have a changed life that is so much better than anything I could have ever predicted or asked for. I wake up every day with hope for what today brings. I'm excited to hug and kiss my wife and kids. I'm passionate to help others find God's plans and purpose for their lives. And passion is really at the heart of what I tell anybody is the key to breaking free from addiction. Finding what God has for you gives you something to chase after. When you start moving forward in your life, you are less likely to fall back into your old life. Vision gives us victory over addiction. I believe God has goals for your life that are specifically made for you. And when I got that revelation for myself, it was an adrenaline shot in my heart. If God had a special plan for me, I wanted to find it. So, God's plan has led me on an epic journey of finding passion, vision, and faith. Do you want to know how to write God's sentence for your life? I bet you do. And I think it's the only bet worth chasing. the new John Simmons show, where you can find God's sentence for your life and become the new you. Tonight's conversation, sports gambling. Again, you're like, John, I'm listening to the Christian show. I thought we were going to hear about Jesus. We'll get there. This has a lot to do with the lives of people. John 10:10 describes that the devil wants to come steal from us, kill us, and destroy our lives. You'll find yourselves maybe starting small, and maybe you win a couple bucks, and then you continue to go on, and then all of a sudden the thrill of $20 isn't enough anymore. I didn't become a full-blown gambling addict who lost $500,000 overnight. It took 10 years for that to happen. I had to meet my bookies in special designated parking lots. I could list all the things that I was doing wrong. That's why I have a unique perspective here, guys. I'm someone who can show you why this is bad because I've experienced it for myself. I don't want you to lose hope. There's a reason Las Vegas is only in one place. It's because we don't really want to live the life of Las Vegas in our everyday life. Oh my gosh, can you believe it's called Sin City and people don't realize that maybe some of the things we're doing there are against God's will? The word casino, by the way, has the word sin in it. Legalized sports betting will destroy lives, and it will steal the future that God has for so many people. You don't think your 10-year-old who has access to their iPhone is going to know how to download an app and place a bet on a game that they're watching with their dad? A huge thing for sports that people get on Twitter and talk about all the games. What if Twitter allows for a screen to pop up and you can now bet the game that you're talking about? How easy will it be for you to click a button that says, yeah, I think the Patriots will beat Green Bay today? Gambling is not a recreational game. That's what they'll try and tell us. It's not a game at all. It's your life. It's your livelihood. When you start betting sports, they're going to track all that activity too, and they're going to make it real easy to know your betting habits. They're going to know the teams you like. They're going to try and sell you, just like Amazon or Facebook, to target you. An ad will pop up. Hey, you want to bet your favorite team today? They play at 3. All you got to do is click this button. Stuff like that gets people into trouble. It's not that one moment that gets you into trouble. It's the repetitive habit. 1 Timothy 6:9. People who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. This is the Bible. The Word of God says if you're chasing after money, if you long to be rich, and that's what many people will use the sports gambling as a tool to try and gain wealth, don't be deceived by the people who will tell you that, oh, you should only do this recreationally, because they don't want you to do it recreationally because they wouldn't make any money if you did that. They want you to have a problem. They want you to want to do it every day. They are going to target you and market to you and advertise to you so that you do it every day. You'll be trapped. And the Bible says right here, you will be trapped by many foolish and harmful desires, and you will be plunged into ruin and destruction. How do you not do that? Verse 11, run from these evil things. Pursue righteousness and the godly life. Run from evil things. Don't let the world tell you this is a great idea. Don't let people tell you, oh, we're just going down there, it's just $5, because that $5 can turn into your life savings. That $5 can turn into your whole life being destroyed. I can tell you from experience, do not walk down that trail. Don't open the door to it. Pursue a godly life. What is a godly life? Following God's plans for your life. He created and designed you to do good things through Christ Jesus. You can look it up for yourself in Ephesians 2:10. And I would invite you tonight that if you don't know Christ, to invite him into your heart to be your Lord and Savior. Confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is Lord, and was raised from the dead. You shall be saved. Don't let this be the issue that keeps you from God's plans for your life. That's going to do it for tonight's show. Until next time, guys, we pray you discover a future and a hope for your life today.